Across the street from Mia and Jay Zuko stood an old white house. It had a sloping tin roof, and each window was completely covered, as if to keep all light from entering the aging building, or perhaps to keep anyone from peering inside. The front porch had a single bulb with which to light the entryway. Not that anyone ever stepped into that space unless they were trying to sell something, and even then, they'd quickly leave. The front door had a cat door roughly cut in to let the area's stray cats come and go. The home was close to the road, but still surrounded by trees and bushes. However, one could still make out the white shed off to the side of the house, in the backyard. It was nearly identical to the house in color and roof. The shed wasn't large enough to have ever been a garage, so neighbors assumed, if they ever gave it much thought, that it was used for storage. In front of the shed was an old white car which never moved, and a gray, rusted 1940s pickup truck filled with debris. It stood like a lone soldier guarding the drive, a shell of what it once was when it rolled off the production line in Detroit, with sparkling paint and new tires. Its original owner, one could imagine, being so proud to drive his new truck home to show his wife and kids. It had probably seen so much change in its time. Where had it traveled? Were there children taught to drive in this truck, grinding the gears? It has seen automobiles come and go in its time as it stood there, silently, watching, waiting. An old man lived in the house. His name was Caulfield. He was rarely seen, and it was even more rare that he'd speak to anyone, even his oldest neighbors. He appeared to be in his 70s. His hair was scruffy, his face rarely shaved, and his clothing unkempt. The story around the neighborhood was that the old truck had belonged to his father, the truck being nearly as old as Caulfield. Perhaps even he had learned to drive in the old soldier. It was said that Caulfield had been born in this house and he would live there until the day he died. When Caulfield was seen, it was because he was going back and forth between the old home and the old shed. He never had even a single item in his hand during either trip. It was curious to Mia and Jay that they had never seen him carry anything to or from the shed. They'd also seen cats go into that cat door, but had never seen them in the neighborhood again. Those two were warned, as all children who lived nearby were, to leave the old man alone. Even their parents seemed to know, deep down, that he was a man who wanted to be left to his own devices. It was clear that he would not return a friendly wave or even make eye contact. "Just leave old Caulfield alone. He gives me the creeps," said one parent to his child. But Mia and Jay were more curious than most, so they devised a plan to follow him to the shed one evening. Then they could brag to their friends about how brave they were and tell them of their adventure. They kept an eye on the old house for weeks, but saw nothing, until one night, after their parents had gone to bed, Jay came and got Mia. "Shh," he whispered. "Old Caulfield. There. Do you see him?" he asked as he pointed to the old man's backyard. Mia could just barely make out the shape of the man, but yes, she did see him. He walked to the shed and pulled the string on the single bulb, and the shed lit up. Only a sliver of light came through the window, which was mostly blocked, and then he shut the door behind him. Mia and Jay quickly and quietly got on their shoes and snuck out the back door, running across the street, sneaking past the old soldier, and finally, coming to the window, they slowly peeked in. What they saw, as reported to their parents and the police, was Caulfield. He was sitting on a stool, facing a recliner, and he was yelling. He sounded very upset, but he was also seemingly crying hysterically. The kids positioned themselves to get a better view, and when they did, they saw an old corpse. Mia put her own hand over her mouth to keep herself from screaming. Its skin was tight and dark, its mouth wide open as if in an eternal scream. Its eyes dried and staring off towards the window. Towards them. They heard Caulfield ask the corpse, "What? Where?" And just then, he whipped his head around and caught eye contact with Mia and Jay. He quickly pulled the string on the light bulb, and it could be heard crashing back and forth. The children took off running. Jay fell near the old soldier, and just before the bone-white hands of Caulfield could grab his shirt, Mia grabbed him by the arm, practically dragging the boy across the street and into their house. They swung open their door and immediately locked it. They ran to their parents' room, and with their chests heaving, gasping for air, they told them the story of what they'd just seen. The police were called, and Caulfield was arrested for grave robbing. No one knows how long ago Caulfield had dug into his father's grave and brought him home. No one knows exactly why either, as Caulfield died suddenly from a heart attack while in police custody. And no one knows that that corpse was speaking to Caulfield in that shed. No one but Mia and Jay, as they never could tell that part of the story because it seemed too unbelievable to be true. But it was true. And now the house sits empty, but on occasion the single bulb still lights up in the shed.